Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and in this video I'd like to take a little look at some of the later trade figures to explain to those Brexit supporters who are still waiting for the German car industry to come to their rescue why they might be waiting a very long time. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news and politics, please subscribe to the channel and click the bell notification icon. So back in 2016, people in the UK were told that we could leave the EU and still get all the benefits of membership. That anyone should believe something so ridiculous is frankly a national embarrassment and a sad indictment of our media. However, support for Brexit was so finely balanced that Brexiteers thought they needed to cover all bases. Fair enough. So, to address the issue that the EU would not really want us to enjoy the benefits of membership if we were no longer paying our subs or following the rules, they came up with the notion that the German car industry would insist that we get free trade without any obligations. Because most people are sensible enough to understand if you leave, of course you can't get all the benefits that countries ordinarily need as members. What makes us so special? Because we're too important a market for car makers in Germany. Now, obviously, anyone who bothered to research how trade actually worked at that point would understand that this is impossible. It's like trying to persuade NASA to use Ribena instead of rocket fuel for their next launch. But most of the public do not understand how international trade works, even at a basic level. Fine. But the idea was predicated on the following. So, first of all, that we buy a lot of German cars because, they're really good and they don't break down. Okay, sure, yes. Second, that German car manufacturers would not want to have a hard time selling in the large UK market because of Brexit. It's undoubtedly true. But it ignores the fact that they do understand how international trade works. German car producers understand that you cannot have completely free trade with a third country that doesn't follow their rules without compromising the integrity of the entire single market. And that's not my inference, that's what they said. And then third, that the EU is actually run by Germany. After all, what power? Let us imagine that German car manufacturers really wouldn't want any downsides to Brexit, and they'd insist that even if we left, we still maintained strong trading ties. What could car manufacturers in Germany really do in terms of strong-arming the EU? Unless, of course, the EU wasn't really this union of nations, but just a front for the Fourth Reich. And it made sense to a chunk of the British public, mostly in England, for those who didn't grow up in this country, or for those who were just much younger than me. For the tabloid press, as I was growing up, it was constantly keeping its readers in a state of Second World War, just constantly there. They were writing as if it was still going on. All their Eurosceptic poison was poured onto their pages as if the war was still active. Europe was always referred to as them, even though we were part of it. Part of the entire project from the 1970s. And any beef they had was with Germany, either directly or indirectly. The European community was characterised as the German Empire in the British tabloids. If they had a problem with France or Italy, the problem would actually be Germany putting them up to it. Bear in mind that the Daily Mail actually backed Hitler, so they continued to write as if his takeover of Europe was actually successful and stood the test of time. That should come as no surprise. So to readers who had a lifetime of this sort of indoctrination, they could sort of accept that an important industry would have major influence on the only government that was actually in charge of the whole of Europe. Remember, that's what also drove the schism. That we were never part of Europe. It was always Germany calling the shots on this, that and the other. It wasn't. It was one of three. We were one of the other three. But a significant number of people voted Brexit in the belief that although it doesn't normally make sense that you get to carry on enjoying the facilities of a club once you are no longer a member, in this case, somehow it did. Only it didn't work out that way. We don't have completely free trade with the EU. And I know the government claim that we have a free trade agreement. That word is a bit of a misnomer here. See, There are some things we're not allowed to export to the EU at all, so that's not free trade. Some of what we can export is limited to certain quantities. So it's like, well, you can send 2 boxes of this thing, but not 3. Well, you know, and when we export anything at all, there's loads of paperwork to go with it. There are import duties potentially payable at the other end. There are delays at the ports. Oh my goodness, there are delays at the ports now, which are only going to become more severe as well. The cost of transport is much higher, as is the uncertainty over the reliability and time taken to deliver the goods. The German car manufacturers are taking their time, aren't they? The Brexit supporters chuntering along as they look at their watches. Are they going to turn up at all? I'm starting to get the impression the German car manufacturers may not come to our rescue here. And there's a couple of reasons for this. The first is that it's impossible. International trade is based on markets. If you are trading to a customer in that market, from inside that market, you know, both the seller and the buyer in the same market, you face few, if any, trade problems. It's all nice and easy. And this is the big benefit of the single market. Free trade around some of the wealthiest consumers in the world. But if you want to trade from outside that market, you face barriers at the border with that market. You know, the government kept trying to say there would be no non-tariff barriers to trade with the EU. We've got all of them. All of them. You will face customs barriers, standards barriers. You may face quota limits. You might also need to provide documentation so that import duties can be applied. All of these things take time. All of these things have costs attached. Someone needs to check that it's all been done, so there will be delays. The delays at the borders of Dover and the border either side of Dover and Calais, fairly extensive, huge in both directions. You may imagine this is because we've not yet sorted out our systems. Yeah, it's all very new, Phil, you'll see. And yeah, we will accept that they didn't really get it all working properly, but it'll sort itself out. And the thing is, yeah, if we did a better job of building systems that are more reliable and user-friendly and, you know, actually worked, we will cut those delays down. But where you have a border between markets, you will have delays. And this isn't because of EU rules. This is rules that apply everywhere in the world. Even if the German car industry faced an existential threat from trade barriers of the British market, because, you know, they only sold cars to Britain and nowhere else, there'd be nothing they could do against the realities of international trade. And the second reason is that the German car industry and actually German economy in general don't actually need us that badly. Yes, we're a large market. Is it disappointing that it's now harder to trade with us? Of course it is. You know, the latest figures are out for the first 11 months of last year, and an economist has noted that German exports to the UK are down 2% in the first 11 months of 2021 as compared to the same period in 2020. Now, that's not good. I mean, 2020 as well, we were blighted by the pandemic. So the fact that last year it was down even more than then, that's bad. You know, 2% down. Now, any loss in trade is not good. And I'm not going to downplay it just because, 2% doesn't sound very much. It's still bad. But here's the thing. That's to Britain. Their exports overall are up 14% in total and across the board. They're up 10% to China, 18% to the USA, 17% to other EU countries as a whole, as high as individually 24% up with Italy. So although trade being down with Britain 2% looks disappointing, if your overall exports are up 14% to the entire world, then you are winning at life. And I want to point out another couple of things. First, this is comparing 2021 with 2020. As I say, it shows just how much Germany bounced back in 2021 compared to 2020, the year when the pandemic basically closed European production and trade for several months. The second thing to note is, although German exports to the whole of the UK went down 2%, their imports from the UK were down 8% in the same period. So in terms of the flow of trade in both directions, the big loser here was the UK, because our trade with Germany went down way more than Germany's trade with us. And of course, Brexit is the factor here. German exports last year were up to every major market. The EU, China, the US only went down for the UK. And because they didn't face trade barriers to exports to Northern Ireland, as long as it didn't pass through Britain, what we're really talking about here is trade losses to Britain. But Britain lost way more trade in the opposite direction. And there are a couple of reasons for this. The first and obvious one is that British exporters faced full customs and standard systems and checks if they wished to sell to, say, German customers. German exporters to Britain did not face the same level of trade barriers because we hadn't prepared for Brexit. And so we couldn't put them in place. And the second is that Germany is part of a large single market. If it loses sales to one part of that market that has chosen to isolate itself off from the world, it can find customers that it's more able to sell to within that large market who are struggling to now buy from Britain, because that's the other thing. There will be customers around the single market who used to get their stuff from Britain, but it's now much harder to do that. German producer goes, we can supply you, don't you worry, son. So they get more business that way. In other words, German producers, just like other EU producers, can gain new customers who were having to abandon British suppliers thanks to those trade barriers. But British businesses don't have the same option. You know, that's why British trade has gone down so much more. You can look around the much smaller British market. You can try and find some customers who are struggling to get their imports from the EU, and you may find the odd one, but most are not going to, because your market is much smaller. There are fewer potential customers. So that's how the saga of the German car cavalry that never showed up to save our arse ends. Hope you found the video interesting. If you did, don't forget to click the like button. If you'd like to support the channel further, please also click the Patreon link for details. And until next time, I'll see you later.